All right. Hey guys. Hey everyone. Again, this is Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn. Happy to teach the class today for you guys. So today the topic is actually going to be very, very practical. Maybe a little bit boring to some people because we're going to talk about endgames, and I hear like people are really bored with endgames. But hopefully you're not going to be bored with these games because very, very instructive games. And as always, the way I like to do my lectures, I want to be interactive as much as I can. So please make sure to post your answers in the chat. So I've got the chat going. Some people say end games are fun. Okay, there we go. So yeah, so the way it's going to be is I'm going to be going over game fragments. I'm going to be skipping over some two key positions, and I'm going to be asking you guys questions like solitaire chess mode, and hopefully you get to play like some of the great players. So let's start. Today we're going to start with this game, Albornoz Cabrera against Ivanchuk. So Ivanchuk does not need to be introduced. I hope everybody knows how strong Chucky is, and perennial used to be top 10, top 20 player. Now he's dropped off the list, but still a force to be reckoned with, and has been occasionally beating Magnus Carlsen and Kramnik in important games. So definitely he needs to be respected. But in this game, as you will see, a pretty strong grandmaster, 2566 rated, wants basically a draw with white against a top GM. And you guys probably may sense that when you play black and you're playing against a low-rated opponent, it's not always easy to get a position where you can play for a win. And that's exactly what happened. So let's jump right into it. Again, you may see at the opening and say, wait a second, this is the boring Petrov. Especially after the next move, Queen E2. This is called the endgame variation. Basically, you force queens right off the bat. And we have perfect symmetry, right? There's only one open file, so these moves are more or less straightforward. Bishop E7, Knight C3. You may wonder, how on earth is Chucky gonna play for a win? He's a whole tempo down at the moment, okay? And the way white is using his extra move is basically to keep trade, and basically he's gonna reach a position where he's gonna offer a draw. So you see where it's coming, but hopefully the answer will not be obvious to you how black is going to reply. Actually, white does castle long, which looks a little bit like an attempt to play for win, but in reality, nope, it's still part of a big, boring plan to trade pieces. So Chucky plays bishop e6. Evan says, boo, that's right. d4, though, white is trying to be somewhat aggressive a little bit. d5 may be coming at some point. So, of course, knight d5 is logical. Now major trades are happening. First, a couple of minor pieces here, another couple of minor pieces there. And we're basically seeing the classic situation of one open file. Now, how many openings do you know which result in one open file? Lots and lots of openings. The E file can be in the Petrov, in a lot of the different Berlin variations. The symmetrical Berlin. Exchange French is huge. We're actually going to have a topical game of the Exchange French coming up too. So pretty much almost every major opening, there's going to be some endgame with an open file. And the reaction to the open file is different among some players. So let's get to the critical position. So knight h4, basically the idea white is trying to potentially trade the bishop, maybe threaten knight f5 a little bit. Chucky says, no, I'm just going to play rook e8 and hide my king. So bishop f3 is coming. Bishop takes, knight takes. Okay, so now king d7. Notice this is a very slight but important moment. A lot of you may probably play king f8 and say, hey, I've completed manual castle or castle by hand. But we know in the end game, the king wants to be around the center. We never know where the king is going to end up, king side, queen side. So we want to keep the king nice and safe around the center. So king d7 is how you should play it. That's what Chucky does. I hope this is all relatively straightforward at the moment. We're getting to the key question right now, guys. White, of course, follows his opening strategy. Haha, how can you play this for a win? James is asking. There we go. That's my next question to you. Black takes, rook takes. And here's my question. What would you play as black and why? All right, so that's my question. All right, so pay attention, guys. This is the first major question of today. So this is not a warm-up question. This is a very difficult question. Okay, so try to really figure out there is only one move that you can try to play for a win with black, but that requires some pretty deep understanding of chess. All right, one person who is direct messaging me, his name I will not mention. His name starts with a G. He got it right. All right, let's see. Some people are also trying to get it right. Close, but not quite. Okay, first of all, before we even move forward, I want to say that if you think rook e8 is your autopilot move and shake hands, okay, this is not a bad result to make a draw with black. But again, we're trying to prove that even lifeless positions like these can be played. Magnus Carlsen has made a living playing positions like that, right? So we definitely want to, focus, guys. We want to definitely get it right. So I see people are guessing a little bit here, but I still haven't seen a lot of people got the right move or the right idea. Focus, guys. So again, to understand how one can play for a win, there's no weaknesses in white's camp, right? You probably don't want to trade the rooks off, even though white has the open file, there are no entry points. So you really need to think of a schematic idea, like a plan, how you want to set up your pieces and how you want to set up your pawns, especially where you want the knight on c6 to go. All right, I've got excellent answer from Ryo. All right, so far so good. Yeah, some people are getting close. Okay, and the correct answer, guys, is B5, X-Clan. So a couple people got this one right, believe it or not. And it's not really the move that guarantees black a victory or anything like that at all. The position is still roughly balanced. But in terms of practicality, this is the only way to try to create an advantage for black. So if you think this is an easy draw, you may also, check his opponent, who is a 2500, 2550 GM, also thought this is an easy draw. He didn't really understand this move b5. He's like, okay, so what's the big deal? I'm just going to play my move c3, create this beautiful protected pawn chain, right? And what's the big deal about this b5 move? Well, but don't be too hasty with this b4, guys. b4 is not quite what we want. So the whole point, if you said to get the knight to d5, you get full credit. But first, a5, hinting at the queen side structure that I may want to really play a4 next, right? Not necessarily b4. b4 is not his idea. He wants to play a4, and guess what? If b3 happens, he's hinting that the rook is ideally placed to get to the a2 or a1 square. So d5 square is already yours, more or less, right? It's basically yours for the future. All right, so white player says, you know what? I'm going to play king c2. I'm not even sure what black is trying to achieve here. What is Chucky doing? Of course, a4. And now, finally, we are getting to a position that there could be some practical problems. So king d3, of course, centralizing the king is logical. And knight e7. And so white is kind of discouraged to play b3 because black wins the open file. c4, not quite what white wants, right? I mean, he breaks up the pawns and gives blacks more targets. Maybe c4 move is not a bad move, actually, but The problem is more or less psychological. White does not have a plan. So he kind of has to wait and sit here and say, you know what? So what if your knight gets to d5? I'm just going to play g3 or something like that, right? What's the big deal? And so the next stage is really cool. See what happens, how Chucky plays this one. So knight d2, trying to improve the knight. g5. A lot of people actually mentioned g5 instead of b5 on move on the first question, which was actually very close to correct. This is very common way of gaining space, right? You're taking away squares from pawns. You may also play this or this in the future. And guess what? d5 square is still potentially yours. So g3 is played, anticipating knight d5, of course. f5, why not take away e4 square from the knight? Knight f3. That is a move, guys, that to me finally shows that white does not have a clue what to do in this position. Again, like I said, he's playing without a plan. He is thinking to himself that, well, I'm just going to sit like this, and eventually black will have to do something, and that will give me counterplay. Which may not be necessarily bad strategy, but the problem is black can improve his position, and so Chucky plays knight d5. Knight is ideally placed. Now compare this position to just the beginning of the endgame. My question is, did you sense that black has made progress and white just kind of did nothing for a bit? I would probably say yes. Good question from James, who still thinks this is an easy draw. Yep, this is where I think a lot of people may feel a little bit edgy as white. They're like, well, maybe it's still a draw, but it's not as easy as it seemed initially. And I think a lot of people have a hard time also answering this question. Well, what if white just sits back and does nothing, just shuffles his pieces? How is black going to win the game? And this is not a very good question to ask because grandmasters don't, have a plan from the beginning of that endgame to the end how Chucky is going to win this game. He basically creates little by little, tiny, tiny progress. Maybe a little threads here and there, but it's all about tiny plans. One, two, three mover plans just to create something. Maybe induce a weakness, get an outpost, get a file, or as we saw, simply get space. Black is just getting more and more space. All right, so knight d2, white is basically shuffling. f4, here we go. Finally, one file is about to open. White can never take on f4. That's going to be a pretty terrible pawn formation. We can play rook f8 and get ready to open the f file at our leisure. Just very difficult for white to play this position. Knight e4, he's still basically saying, I've got everything covered. What's the big deal? f2 is covered by the knight. Okay, so what? Chucky plays rook f8 anyways. I would agree, equals over plus is a logical assessment here, although the engines who have no fear and who calculate perfectly will laugh at you and say probably white can draw. Any engine can draw this with their eyes closed, but keep in mind, chess is a human game. There's a lot of psychology. If you saw that your opponent just made progress over the last, several moves and you've done absolutely nothing and you're white and you kind of came to the game thinking it's an easy draw, well, now you kind of have to fight and try to come up with the defensive ideas, right? So he plays this clever idea of rook h1. What's the idea of rook h1? There's no open file yet. Let's see what people are saying. h4, maybe h4 is his idea, but I think the main idea, he's actually trying to anticipate f takes g, prophylaxis. Yeah, exactly. And then the rook finally has a target. So even though rook f8 is logical to open up the f file, now you got to be careful, guys, as black. You don't want to do that. So my question is, how does black make progress here? We cannot really take on g3. So think about this position for a bit. It's not obvious. Like I said, there's no one grand scheme how you win the game. Bring the king up, somebody says. Provoke b3. All right, it's not super easy to provoke b3. Where are you going to bring the king? To f5? Then what? King g4? Well, I don't know. You may get into trouble. He's got a rook, bunch of pawns, and a knight around there. You have to be a little careful. He may not allow you to even get to f3. So you have to be careful about bringing the king up. But interesting idea. So let's see what Chucky does. He plays king c6. Now, if you think he wants to bring the king to a5 or to b6, you're wrong. His strategy is exactly what I said earlier. He does not have a clear plan himself, but he points to his opponent that, guess what, my friend? I am the one with easier position to play. You just played the move, rook h1. Are you really going to leave the rook there for the rest of the game? If you move the rook, now you got to calculate fg. So this is more of a psychological move, king c6. There's no concrete idea. He's just kind of hinting and saying, you know what? I can afford to make useful moves. No, b4 is not really his idea. b4, then you got to watch out for c4, and your beautiful knight gets dislodged. All right, so let's see what happened next. Rook e1. g4. Interesting. Notice how he does not take g3. He realizes that, well, after hg, rook h1 is still a possibility. And some people actually did mention the idea g4, so good job to you guys. Once again, we're grabbing more and more space. So a3 is played. Not necessarily that he was worried about b4, but I just thought maybe he wants to just secure this pawn structure. Now, knight b6, knight c4 is a possibility, but there's always knight d2. Unclear if the knight on c4 is really your plan. You may do it later. h5, though. Once again, black is not doing anything, guys, extremely difficult here. Keep in mind, from the beginning of the move b5, he's pursuing the same exact strategy called space grabbing strategy, slowly improving the position. Okay, I read somewhere that Kasparov said what the difference between a strong GM and a weak GM or an IM is that a strong GM can play a bunch of improving moves in a row without forcing things, without playing any forced sequences or massive trades. The slow buildup is what a lot of people have hard time with. And Ivanchuk is doing exactly that. No trades in the last many moves, just slow buildup. Okay, knight f2. Knight d2. He's saying, well, yeah, go ahead and come to f2. I'm ready there. Rook e2 is going to come in. King d7. Oh, I changed my mind, Chucky says. And I can afford to do that, right? He's got a promising position. Rook e4. Maybe provoking something, maybe not. Hard to say. Simply rook f7. Now, maybe time pressure is going to be a factor. It's now move 32. Keep in mind, white needs to reach move 40. He plays back to rook e1, saying, all right, prove to me that you have an advantage. And then Chucky finds a really awesome rerouting. Knight comes back, knight e4, knight g6. It looks like terrible, terrible plan. Your knight was right in the middle of the board, controlled all these key squares, but it wasn't really doing anything specific. Knight on g6 has a very important function, guys. Knight d2, d5, very important move. We are getting more and more space away from white. Now this knight is basically stuck. Only 2 squares I have available for knight. The rook is stuck, guarding against pawn takes and rook f2 invasion. Okay, and yep, you guys are correct. After rook f1, what's happening here? He's anticipating fg, but Chucky just get, well, not quite well, I guess you can think about h4, but Chucky tricks his opponent. Oops, I've got the open file. And you can't ever contest it. That's it, guys. Strategically, the game is very close to be over. Even though not a single trade, not much has happened, but you're getting a situation where white is approaching zugzwang. Zugzwang is very important in a lot of endgames. And here, f3 is the losing move. Move 37 is losing the game. The only move that could get the game going is really inhuman engine move b3, right? Trying to go for rapid trades and counterplay. Not an easy move at all. I can't think of anyone playing b3. Just not psychologically, when you've been holding and doing nothing for a long time, playing b3 in this position is very difficult. But my question is, okay, so what's the big deal? He wants to trade everything on the king side. Why is f3 so bad? Well, the problem is rook is coming in. Rook is coming in, guys. Rook e2, and that's it. Not only do we get the open file away from white, we've also got the second rank. And this is where white resigned. He literally resigned here because he saw this line. Pawn takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, knight h4, and now you see what's happening. This guy's fallen and knight f3. And black is crushing. You can continue the line a little bit longer if you want. King d3 takes f5, g3. The g pawn is deciding the game. And that's it, crushing. Crushing victory. So again, the key position is here. Go back here, where white sort of played this move, rook f1, thinking that, well, I've got everything under control, but he forgot about rook e7. He forgot about rook e7. Not an easy position anyways. If he plays rook e2, a lot of people may think, okay, I'm just going to play rook e2. No, there's no entry squares. f1, f2 are covered. Yeah, Karpov style, that's true. I can play h4 perhaps. This is one idea that Checky was preparing, right? And we're going to invade now either on the h file after hg, or maybe we can push f3 first. But again, situation is very dire for white. All right, let's move to the next example. I thought that was a very instructive example. I'm going to move on to the next example. Mr. Carlsen playing against MVL. Okay, world champion here. And this is from those Carlsen Rapid tournaments, you know, that he organized. Very powerful. Let's take a look at this game. Again, I'm going to skip through the opening stage because that's not the point today, but this is we're looking at actually from the MVL perspective. We're looking at from black. Of course, he's a huge Grunfeld fan, right? So for those who play the Grunfeld, this bishop d2 line looks like a sideline, but it's the kind of annoying sideline that could really discourage a lot of Grunfeld players. So focus, guys, pay attention. Bishop d2. Now the main point of that move is after bishop g7, e4. If knight takes c3, he can take with the bishop. And he doesn't get the typical broken up Grunfeld pawns. So that's why MVL plays knight b6. Now, white's got a beautiful center, and this knight is misplaced. Already, strategic battle has been won with bishop e3. Now, what is the drawback of this position? Well, the drawback is, of course, white has lost precious time. Notice he played 2 moves with 1 piece in the opening. As a result, black is going to try to aim at the center. So typically black castles, h3. Another very cool prophylactic move. Aimed to prepare knight f3 and to stop bishop g4. He is building up his center. e5, you got to hit the center. MVL is doing everything by the book. When somebody is wasting time, you really have to strike the center. Knight f3. And now this more or less endgame is by force. I think both players sort of knew about this opening. They went into this position, knight c6, trades, trades, trades. And we're getting to the open file, the d file position. So obviously he doesn't want bishop takes c6. He plays knight here, a3, kicks the bishop back. Now he goes back to c6. White did not want to, of course, give up that bishop. More trades are happening. Bishop e6, castles, standard endgame from this Grunfeld line. And MVL just basically says, you know what? I'm going to trade this rook. Rook d1, takes, takes. Now he brings the king close. King f6, f4 is logical. king s7, king f2. And finally, with this, we've reached our next major endgame. What do we have here? And what would you play as black? So try to evaluate this position. That's my first question. And once you figure out what to do as black, write down your move in the chat for us. So you think this position is equal, white's better, black's better. What should black do? Who is playing for win? If anyone is playing for win. Interesting. I got a couple of answers. Some people said white's better. One person said black's better. So already there we have, I pick black any day. Wow. A lot of people are saying white is better though. So it looks like even in the chat, people are not even sure who is better. Plus equal, definitely. Okay, interesting. Plus some people are really like saying white is clearly better. So far, no one has said the position is roughly even. Interesting. People taking sides. All right, that's an interesting observation, at least, that we have some clear divisions. Most people do prefer white, which is interesting. White is slightly better. All right, so now that we've got some people are evaluating, what are you going to play as black? Because it's black's turn right now. The most natural move, your opponent has the open file. Don't you want to trade the last pair of rooks off the board with rook d8? Or if you don't, you need to suggest a plan. You need to suggest a plan. So first question is, how many people will play rook d8 as black? Let me know in the chat. The most logical move. Rook d8. You want to trade, right? If you're a little worse. Maybe you're worse, maybe you're not worse, I don't know. Take space on the king side. Okay, and how are you going to take space on the king side as black? Knight d7, c6, f6, a5, b5, a5. Interesting. Okay, I see. So guys, the correct answer is rook d8, the most obvious move in the position, the move that MVL played without much thinking, is a pretty big mistake and the reason why he lost the game. So I want to explain to you why this position is actually becoming very dangerous for black. And then we're going to go back and I want to explain to you why black should not trade the rook. You saw part of the game. Okay, so some people have seen some. All right, so Magnus just improves his king. And the problem, guys, is the following. Here is how I can explain this position. At the moment, these 3 against 2 are not going anywhere, right? White can easily play b4, a4 if he needs to. But the main issue is that these 4 are going to be moving rather quickly with a centralized king, maybe g4, maybe f5, e5. Basically, when these pawns become mobile, maybe some knight d5 ideas, black's lack of space and coordination is going to be a factor. Think of white as basically having an extra pawn on the king side. So MVL plays all the logical moves, f6, anticipating that white may try to push the pawns. Knight d7, a lot of people mentioned the move knight d7. He's doing everything. Of course, b4 just stops c5. h6, again, logical move because you want to put the pawns possibly on the opposite color of your bishop. a4, Magnus is grabbing more space. g5, MVL is doing everything right, he thinks, but the position is bad. It's very bad. Pawn takes, pawn takes. And now, guys, is the key moment. This is the position where you realize one important factor. Black lacks counterplay. Just like in the previous example, Ivanchuk's opponent was kind of doing nothing for a while, and then he got into space issues, and then ran out of moves. Same thing is happening to MVL. He is missing the rook. He's missing the rook to start creating counterplay. All these entry squares, the G file, right? Without counterplay, black is suffering, and he lost the game really quickly. I'll just show you what he did. Knight b8, check. Bishop is stronger than knight, took with the pawn. Now, but potentially there is path here. There's also weaknesses over there. Already this position is probably close to losing. He tried his b6 move. Didn't really help. h5 secured the pawn. Put again the pawn on the dark square, but guess what? The bishop is gonna dominate the knight. First king here, f5. This is more of a desperation move, not helping. And now I love this bishop b5 move. Literally game over after that. He played a couple more moves because it was time pressure. Finally, he resigned. You can say this game is a masterclass by Magnus against a super GM. But in reality, black only made one mistake in this game. Of course, engines will show some improvement how to try to hold, but with some crazy lines this endgame. Already psychologically, it's hard. One mistake, position is completely fine for black, I will tell you that. Black is not worse. Black is not worse. You have to keep the rooks on the board. Some people mentioned the move c5. You could play c5, it's not a bad move, but the simple strategy, play f6, play this, and just go for g5. On any trade, you're gonna open up the g file or the h file or maybe the f file, right? If white plays same as in the game, let's say he goes there. Guess what? We are ready. We are ready to get counterplay. Black will never lose this position with an active rook like that, right? So the goal is you had to anticipate that white's only winning attempt is to push the pawns. When white pushes the pawns, files are bound to open. You need the rook to be patient and get counterplay. Notice how we're not even pushing these pawns. We could, but it's not easy. Plus there's knight coming. We got to control the square if we move the knight. So it's really difficult. So the aim is to create this beautiful idea. And then if white even does that, now we can play for a win. With bishop f7, the knight's going to dip back. We get an outpost. Hey, now we're going to start pushing 3 against 2 on the other side, and we are better. Of course, Magnus will never play f5. But that's super GM example. So simplest possible chess positions. Open file, right? Already second game. This time a super GM messed up. All right, let's go through another example. All right, this time we're going to look at it from the white point of view because white is playing our hero, Sam Shankland, who I believe got through to the next stage of the World Cup, right? Are you guys following? He is doing a lot of lectures for us too. Yeah, he advanced. Greg confirms. Good. So this is another example. Shankland's playing Dubov, who is actually advanced to the next stage too. So very strong GMs. Both are 2,700. Here, Shankland dropped a little bit, 2691, but he's back over 2,700. Of course, the question is, it's black's turn, and black just plays this logical move, rook d8. Black is worse, right? We know black is a little worse here, or maybe a lot worse. My question is, if you're Sam Shankland, what would you play as white? And would you trade the rooks? So why don't you guys put yourself in Sam's shoes here and try to figure out the best move. Try to use ideas what we discussed from previous two examples. If you've seen the game, it doesn't mean anything, by the way. So, you know, that doesn't mean that you know the best moves for both sides. So again, white to play. Yeah, how many people would trade rooks? And what would you do here? All right. All right. So one person is already answered this correctly. Shout out to Sunak. I will trade rooks, some people say. Okay. I think we should. People are not quite sure. I would keep the rooks at rook c1. All right, interesting. I'm just reading the comments. All right, so here is what Sam played, guys. Sam took on d8. Now, who think this is a mistake? who think this is the right strategy. Get rid of the black's most active piece. Mistakes, one person says. Let's see what other people say. Evan says good, meaning good move. So again, we have problems. We're not sure what the right move is, but we're not sure if Sam played the best move or not. Mistake, Tori says, okay. Interesting. All right, guys, the correct answer is rook takes d8 is indeed a mistake. After rook takes d8, white loses all of his advantage. White is better in this starting position, and the reason why he is better is because he could attack the king by running his pawn majority. You need the rook to support the pawn storm. The correct answer is any answer with the rook on any square on the back rank. All of these moves maintain advantage for white, or moving the knight. I like that a lot, moving the knight to d2. So whoever said rook g1 also got credit, of course, because any rook move on the back rank. So guys, yet another, if let's call Sam super GM, right, because he's over 2,700, another super GM gets the strong. Why is that? Well, it's not always trivial. Like, he probably wanted to avoid any activity from black's rook, and he thought, well, I'm just going to activate my king, right, and push my pawns, like Magnus did, right? Everything is logical, but no, there is a significant difference between this position and Magnus' position. There's definitely an extra pair of minor pieces, and it's also important to realize that when you're going to be moving your pawns, this king becomes vulnerable. This is the key point, is when you start moving the pawns, right, you're going to open up a file or two, G or H, and this rook can switch over at the right moment. So what could possibly happen? Let's say black brings the knight back into the game, f4, knight d5. Probably we're not going to give up that bishop, bishop b2. Let's say black just plays some weighted moves. Now f5. All of a sudden, black is facing trouble. After knight c4, his pieces are not that well placed. They're not well placed. We're going to play this, right? And there's really not much he can do about it. Of course, there's a little bit of tactical problems. b5 comes with knight a5. The other tactical problem of knight e8, we have this little cute knight g5 tactic. Everybody notices the fork knight e5, right? And so that's a problem area. And if he gets out of any of these forks with rook d8, finally plus over minus. That's how I would eval this position after g5. Black is completely paralyzed. b5 again runs into knight a5. White can take on f6 at the right moment, or more logical to keep pushing the pawn, maybe insert rook g1. Clearly white is much better. So that was the right answer. Now, funny enough, what happened after rook takes d8? Let me go back here. White tried to push the pawns. Unfortunately, though, black simply played knight e6, pawn takes, pawn takes. White got nowhere. I think he ended up losing the game. Yeah. I'm just going to show you a couple more moves, how black got his counterplay, right? So the king never even helped these guys, right? And little by little, Sam got outplayed. And yeah, Dubo was pretty good too, guys. f5, bishop e7. I'm just going to go a little faster just to show you what happened. And that's it. He lost the pawn and ended up losing the game. So we see already third example where Super GM got it wrong, right? MVL MVL should not have traded the rooks. Sam should not have traded the rooks. Ivanchuk did not trade the last pair of rooks that he was playing for win. All right, let's give you another example. All right, this one is famous game. I'm sure a lot of people have seen this game, but it's definitely an important one. From 1990, long time ago, Mikhail Gurevich was a very strong GM. And the story behind this game is the following. Mikhail Gurevich, who himself plays the French, he's a d4 player. He plays d4 against Nigel Short. He needs a draw. He needs a draw with white to qualify to the, so this is interzonal, last round, I think. He needs a draw to qualify to the World Championship candidates matches. Back then, I think there was matches. And he says to himself, wait a second, Nigel plays the French, I play the French, I'm just gonna play e4, and I'm gonna take the pawn. How on earth am I gonna lose this game? I just need the draw, guys, right? Well, guess why? This game is so famous, a lot of books have that game, because psychologically, that's the wrong approach. That's the wrong approach, right? Maybe he'll make a draw, but the problem is you already set your mind to a certain result, right? When you set your mind to a certain result, you're more likely to do what? To trade pieces, maybe unfavorably, to avoid active play when you have to. And if you play too passively, what could happen? Well, I'll show you what could happen. Knight f3, bishop g4, so far so good. Normal, I mean, white is playing extra solid, right? Black can play knight f6, knight e7 plan, knight c6. So bishop d6 is logical. All right, he is set to trade. We saw what Ivanchuk's opponent did in the first example, right, guys? Well, Gurevich is thinking, what's the big deal? I'm a GM. I'm a strong GM, 2640 GM. Higher rated than Nigel Short, by the way, who was 2610 at that time. 1990, a long time ago. All right, so far so good. So far so good. Okay, active move, first active move of the game. But in reality, it's all part of a trading strategy. He just wants to trade, 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 trade. And of course, the first trade of the game of the queens is a concession. Now, a lot of people may not know that A takes B pawn structure actually against these guys favors black, because you can play for b5, b4, and you open the A file. But some people know. Ryo, yeah, I know, good. So I hope a lot of people know this. So again, many openings this happens, right? London system, queen b3, queen b6 happens. Grunfeld's queen b3, queen b6 happen. Some exchange carots, queen b6, queen b3 happen. These ideas are very important, okay? You are okay here to take with the pawn. Very important to remember that. All right, so white plays a3. And of course, the most tempting move here is why not get the free entry square and win the file outright. It's actually a tiny positional trap, which has a little bit of a tactical trap hidden. So my question to you is, would you play rook e2 is black? And if not, why not? If not, why not? Rook e2. I mean, looks pretty good, doesn't it? Some answers are rook a d1 with f3, rook fe1 idea. Maybe. There's actually a much better idea. Yeah, you're close. Sarvagna, yeah, very close. Rook f1, king f1. Rook a4, interesting. Rook a4. I have not thought of rook. No, guys, we're trying to figure out if rook e2 is a good move. Rook e2 for black. So, by the way, Short does not play this move. I would not play it, says James. And guys, the hidden tactic is, I haven't seen anyone mention this tactic as part of your answer. What's the hidden tactic here? There's a trap. Let's say black plays some natural move like h6. Bishop e5. Oopsies. Oopsies, the trap. The rook got trapped. So that's why this is actually a false plan. All right, so a3 move, inviting rook e2, which normally would be a dream square for the rook, does not work. All right, so Short says, you know what, I'm just going to play knight e4. I don't mind trades when they're good for me. Knight takes, rook back to d1, b5. Notice what he's doing. He's improving the pawns, putting them on light squares, because this is a dark square bishop. King f1. I mean, white is a strong GM. He's not simply going to fall apart here. f6, f3 logical move, and of course, rook e1. King f7, takes, check. King d7. Notice his king is getting, once again, like in the checky game, close to the queen side and to the king side, right? He can support both sides when he needs to in the future. King e2. All right, next question, guys. Would you trade the last pair of rooks? Notice that every example, I have a question for you. Do you trade the rooks? Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So you really have to get it right. Oh yeah, there's a typo, yeah. And by now, I think everyone should already know the answer, and the answer is no. Yeah, most people are saying no. You are correct. Just like Chucky and Dubov example, right? The Shanklin Dubov. When you're playing for a win, you really want to keep as many pieces to create threats. And here we do need a rook. The open file is absolutely useless for that rook. There's no entry square. We do need to coordinate the knight and the rook. And very instructive moment. H5 exclam. Yeah, Ryu got it right. H4, of course. And then the knight is starting its journey to better pastures. Bishop f4, knight f5. Already not a bad square for the knight. Thanks for the h-pawn. We are controlling some key squares. But we're not done yet. Bishop d2. b6. Notice how he violates one of the principles. He puts the pawn on the dark square. And the reason why, he has a very cool plan, guys. Rook e2, c5. That's his plan. Simple space grab and expansion. So white is ready for it, right? He brought the bishop over. He's ready for it. He says, all right, I'm just going to play bishop e3. What's the big deal? c4 check, so what? So what? Well, b4, how about that, my friend? That's the move that white did not anticipate, right? All right, free pawn. Check. Wow. Now it turns out that black can give up a pawn, get an open file, but more important, look what he has in store. He's got a checkmate threat. How cool is this? Out of the blue, white's position goes from sort of okay to absolutely critical. Well, it's not a checkmate yet, of course. It's a checkmate threat. But it's a pretty powerful threat, right? Rook e1. Well, of course, no checkmate yet, right? He's not going to walk anything there. But the cool thing is it's very close. It's very close to be checkmate. Like you can't go bishop d2, rook d2 ever. You just have to be super vigilant. Of course, if you do nothing, I'm just going to go here, here, and then knight b5 nature. So, okay, rook e1 is logical, right? He's got things under control. No entry square here. Not mate at least. He's got king d2. But rook a4. Guess what the plan is, guys? The plan is check, win the pawn. We got some targets. Yep, you are absolutely correct, guys. And bishop f2 was the only move. Very difficult move with good chances for a draw. And the point is after check, takes, bishop takes h4, black gets some compensation. Yeah, this is close to a draw. But again, psychologically, right? He was so set on defense the entire game, he plays the most human move in the world. Just get the king out of danger. Why not? Rook takes b4. Rook a1. Active counterplay. By the way, what happens if king c3? We get back the file, right? And the b pawn can start storming. All right, so in the game, he says, finally, I'm going to get my counterplay. He's going after rook a7, rook g7, and the h pawn is going to fall. Well, the drawback, of course, is black has his own play, and short calculates this well. Check, takes, b5, bishop f2, b4. Game over pretty much here. King here, c3, bishop takes, knight f5, resign. Wow, what a game. And of course, the idea is not so much is to go after the bishop, the idea is we're coming in after the c pawn. Yep. So I thought that was quite instructive, and somebody definitely learned their lesson. Don't play for a draw for move 1. Okay, let's go on to the next example. Now, this time we have another famous grandmaster, Arthur Yusupov, in 1993 against American GM Larry Christensen. Very cool idea how to treat a specific endgame with a d file open. So the game begins with a d4 move. Now, there's some comments here by Vishy Anand. By the way, Vishy Anand worked with Yusupov. Yusupov was one of his coaches in 1995 match against Kasparov. Now, have you seen this f3 setup with trying to get some kind of c4 semish? It's an interesting idea against people who like to play this knight f6 d6 Perk style. So e5, very logical move. And look what white does. He simply trades into this endgame. Now, modern day and age players who play this as black are super happy to play this as black, because what they do is they play bishop e6, what Larry Christensen does. And they say, you know what? I got my weak pawns, but in reality, bishop d6, king here, they cover all the key central squares, and I'm going to get counterplay. Right? How do you get this position? You typically play e4, d6, d4, e5. Right? D, bishop c, queen takes d8, bishop c4, you trade. This position you can get more or less by force against people who play various Philidors or the lion setup. You know, there's all these names for these setups. But the problem here is white has one very cool, very unusual plan that puts a big question mark to black's setup. All right, and you might not know this plan. Oh, wow, somebody already knows this plan. Good job. I already saw one answer. One answer there. Yeah, correct answer. So yeah, I didn't know that people have studied or even have heard of this plan, but clearly. So how do you know this plan, Raya? Okay, Andy, wow, knows. So many people know about this plan. Have you seen these positions before? Or you kind of figure it out on your own? Well, bishop e3, c3 is logical. A lot of people will say it, but there's one specific plan. The plan, guys, is to get the knight from here to here. And the only way to do that is a cool way, knight h3, knight f2, knight d3. This is absolutely phenomenal plan. And Yusupov knew about that plan or figured out on the board. But this is how you target that e-pawn. So bishop c5 happened. Knight f2, knight is coming there. Larry Christian says, wait a second. No way, you're not coming to d3. And now black just plays knight c6 and says, I'm solid. No way to break the game. Yeah, you can put your rooks on d1. I'm just going to trade everything and make a draw. But guess what? Yusupov says, hold on a second. I've got another cool idea. King e7. Knight a3. It's funny how white develops both knights to h3 and a3. Do you already see what's coming? Where's the knight heading, guys? Where's the future for that knight? Ah, you think the answer is c4. You'll be quite pleasantly surprised. Knight wants to get to d3, the answer is yes. How do we get there? We just play c3, knight c2, knight e1, knight d3. This is one possible way to get there. All right, so a6 is played in the game, trying to prevent possible knight b5, knight, maybe b5, his idea. All right, quiet move c3, rook d8, king e2, h6. Black is just playing quiet moves. Here comes the knight. If a5, then a4 was with idea b4, and the knight can come back to a3. This is kind of clever way of fighting for those light squares. So a5 is not super easy. All right, so he plays logical move rook d7. Again, guys, whenever there is one open file, it may be a good idea to trade one pair of rooks off the board. Of course, black goes there, take, take. And now everyone, and I mean everyone from all the previous examples, will answer this question, I hope correctly. Will you trade the last pair of rooks? The most logical move is rook d1. Yes. Resounding no. Very good, guys. Absolutely not. Don't play rook d1. You need the rook to help out to create more weaknesses. And the weaknesses could be, maybe you put the knight here and you start expansion here. Ivanchuk style, maybe on both wings, maybe this. Maybe put the pawn there and then play the rook on g1 or h1 and g5. So many cool ways to expand. Black just has to sit there and wait. So you may wonder, well, how did Yusupov play? Well, he did play knight e1, of course. Here comes the knight. And now bishop f2. He's hinting, don't forget, my friend, you still have a weakness there. b6, bishop g3, knight f7. Now both knights are in total paralysis mode. It's time to create a second weakness, right? This concept of a second weakness is very important in a lot of endgames. You hear me talk a lot about that. So a4. b4 may also be a strong move. I like b4 as well, but he started with a4. This is excellent plan, by the way. I like that plan too, to play for h4, bishop h2, g4. White can do all of these moves. a5, all right, now there is a sense, there's something sensing with these pawns, right? Yusupov is feeling something is happening here. Rook c1, as Nimzovich calls this, the mysterious rook move. Why would you put the rook on a closed file? What are you thinking? But okay, he's got an idea, guys. King f6, of course he's thinking about b4, right? He is anticipating pawn takes, check is no big deal. And then there's major issues. Here, we've got a passed pawn potentially, and this guy is weak. All right, so that's why Christensen is waiting. b5 space grab and move. Notice how he anticipated that, right? He got the king there, everything is covered, but black is still tied up. Now let me show you the finish. The finish is really beautiful. Bishop f2 first, regrouping. Yeah, whoever said c4 is right. Yeah, c4 is correct. All right, and now, of course, he didn't want to deal with c5, right? And now the star move of the game, the beautiful sacrifice. Knight takes. Yep, the idea is simple. We get these two connected passers plus the bishop and the rook. These guys are not really helping out much. So in the game, knight d8 happened. Notice how black is going to give up the knight. Rook d1, total paralysis, by the way. Beautiful move. So he just gave up the knight. All right, now it's basically pawn up. Still some work needs to be done, right? Endgame. So bishop c5, stop any knight d4 business. Simply cut. Now we don't mind the trade. We're up a pawn. Rook b3, rook d6. I'm just going to show you how he won. He won rather easily. He got the second one. By the way, do you really care about these two pawns? Absolutely not. Push him, baby, says James. You're right, James. He is pushing the pawns. Check. Okay, why not trade the rooks? Now we can trade the rooks. Black says, no, I don't want to trade. He keeps pushing, and now it's easy win. a5, and okay, if knight c8, then total paralysis, and this is just game over. Resign. Wow, what a performance. My favorite part, though, knight first going there, second going there, both of them heading to the d3 square. Isn't that cool? So what did we learn today? We learned that there are many openings that result in either pure symmetrical positions, like we saw from the exchange French from the Petrov, right? Or we saw a bunch of examples like the Grunfeld with the D file open. All of these positions, you have to know, very important, when to trade the rooks and when to avoid the trade of the rooks. All right, so I hope all of these examples were very useful, both as an attacker and as a defender. And finally, even super GMs mess up sometimes, right? We saw MVL make the wrong decision. He should not have traded the rooks. Sam Schenkel, on the other hand, traded the rooks, lost all his advantage. He should not have traded the rooks. So, and of course, boring, drawish, symmetrical positions are not always drawn, as we saw both from Chucky and from Nigel Short. Always look for chances. All right, that's it from me, guys. See you later.